My name is Patrick Doherty. I'm the Deputy Director of the American Strategy Program here at the New America Foundation. At first, I need to thank our friends from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, Norbert and Gabriela Wagner, who made this event possible. We're pleased that our partnership with Konrad Adenauer has resulted in such high quality and high level German-American dialogue here in this room. Today we welcome our honored guest, Steffen Kampeter. Mr. Kampeter has been the member of the German Bundestag since 1990. Since that time, he has focused his parliamentary service in the field of economics, but also in the areas of environment and research. Today, Steffen Kampeter is the chairman of the Debt Management Committee of the Bundestag, as well as the spokesman of the CDU-CSU parliamentary group on the Budget Committee. His expertise and insight into today's topic is extensive. For our American friends here, the global effects of the subprime mortgage crisis are often opaque. We understand that the possibility of a recession here in the United States, triggered in part by the subprime crisis, will slow global growth, but the depth of the crisis overseas is often obscured by the oceans that separate us. Germany has been hit hard by the subprime speculation, including such names as Deutsche Postbank, Deutsche Bank, and Commerzbank. But the crisis has been magnified for a relatively unique German institution, the public banking sector. Public banks until 2005 were provided discount government loans, which could then be passed on to small businesses, often outcompeting private banks. But in 2005, the EU ordered that the German government must end that preferential treatment, and according to Der Spiegel, public banks lost their business model and turned to gambling on the subprime markets. 2 years later, this past summer, that gamble was lost, as American borrowers began to default on their subprime loans. And public bank after public bank started writing off losses and asking the federal government for bailouts. One bank, IKW Deutsche Industriebank, has so far received over 7 billion euro in 3 rounds of bailouts, and the end is still not in sight. West LB and Sachsen LB are also in dire straits. The scenarios are grim. The public banking sector is a complex pyramid of deposits and loans, all tied to small and medium businesses, as well as to major industrial players. One bank president called this the worst financial crisis since 1931. What does this all mean? How is Germany looking at the United States for allowing such opaque and risky securities to destabilize their market and others? What advice do our German friends have for us? We welcome Steffen Kampeter and look forward to an honest and forthright discussion. And first, what I'd like to do is just go around the room, because we have some very fascinating people with us today. If you could just say your name and your affiliation and go around, we'll just do that really quickly so Mr. Kampeter can know his audience. Please, sir.
Peter Shirley from Brookings Institution.
I'm back at GAO since January after a 4-year stint in Brussels with the NATO International Board of Auditors.
Michael Andrews from CDU.
Thomas Beermann, member and former speaker of the Democratic Union, the Third of Prime and the World Bank.
Karen Donfried for the German Marshall Fund.
Norbert Wagner, no Foundation.
Sam Sheridan, New America Foundation.
Ben Catcher, New America Foundation.
Samir? Oh.
Bolden, New America Foundation. Mark Goldwine, New America Foundation.
Thank you. And with that, I welcome Steffen Kampeter. We look forward to an excellent discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for coming here to the New America Foundation. two or three sentences why I'm here. The budget committee is a bit different than the American. It's a combination between budget, ways and means, and appropriation. So I'm the majority leader, and therefore I regularly have to get insight from the markets, go regularly to places like London, New York, and Washington. This year is a bit different, because I was visiting Charleston, South Carolina for the first time on behalf of German Marshall Fund, and I'm very glad that the Konrad Adenauer Foundation is preparing my Washington program. So I missed New York, but I got an insight on South Carolina, which was amazingly thrilling to me. What can you expect? I was told to speak not longer than 15 minutes. Is a political point of view on economic problem, but an economist speaking. By profession, I'm an economist, just came from Ed Lazar, and he was asking me, not as a politician, but as an economist. That brought me back to my study times. It was just like an exam to me, but nevertheless, it was quite challenging. And I'm here visiting different financial institutions like the IMF, talking to colleagues from the Hill, and get exchange on several political issues. Just for getting some insights and correlations to my political views. What I want to do first, I will give two or three words on the economic situation and expectation in Europe. Second, I want to say something. How do the Europeans feel about subprime and credit crunch and their traditional reaction scheme on that? And I want to comment on what is discussed in Europe as a political reaction on that. I have to wrap it up a bit, but politicians always talk too long. Please shout when I'm too long, okay? First of all, I know that there is a discussion here whether there's a recession in the United States or not. I'm not commenting on that. The latest EU forecast on growth and inflation in the EU shows that we are heading a robust development at the moment, but growth is slowing down and inflation is going up on the Eurozone. On average, we're expecting this year's growth about 1.8%, but inflation above 2.5%. That is not that good as it was in 2007, but I would call it not a recession or something like that to European terms. The growth development is not that bad, but we're a bit scared about inflation. We have some problem fields in the European economy. The first one is France. France is performing bad. Compared to the European average. The growth rate has been tremendously gone down, and there are some inflationary tendency, but even worse Italy is. I was quite surprised that I think in last week's Newsweek magazine there was a leader on Italy, but in fact the economy is poorly performing, and they have economic and political crisis because they are the least stable political system in Western Europe. But the message is quite clear. Growth is okay. Inflation is a very important issue we have to take care of. 2.5% and above is too high for European standards, just above the Latin word. That's the surrounding of what is going to happen over the last year. When the subprime crisis or the credit crunch or the turmoil, I'm using these terms parallel. I'm not talking about only the subprime load, but the financial. Let's take it as a financial market crisis developed over 2007. How do they react? The first step was that Europe raised the question: what's going to happen? That has something to do that outside the United Kingdom, the contribution of the financial market to the political and economic development cannot be compared to yours. The financial market sector is not that influential and important than the United States and the UK. So the first step was that we hear something about what was going to happen. We really do not understand it, and we don't see it as a problem. Second step was that there was a discussion whether the obviously effect of where the obvious effect on the financial market will come into the real market. And the common argumentation of European politician and central bank was, okay, we have got a problem. We got markets dried out on the financial markets. We have problems in the interbanking things. We put liquidity in the market, especially by the European Central Bank, combined with the Fed. But actually, we don't see a real problem for the real-term economy. Actually, that's quite a European point of view, because we always differentiate between the financial markets and what we call the real economy. But nevertheless, slowing growth at the European Union and the Commission now is a result, by the way, of this crisis. And now, if you come into to political scene in Europe, probably the third step has reached. Wow, it has hit us. After a while, we're realizing that something was going to happen. Most of the politicians made a crash course in securitization and the effects of the real economy, and they are challenged on two different sides. They're challenged on the tax side, because if last weeks we have announcement of going down profits, which for a fiscal man, and I means less tax in the budget, and we have several different bailout strategies. Let me point out some European events on that. The first and magnificent one was Northern Rock. Northern Rock is the fourth largest bank in the United Kingdom on the field of house financing, and they did a bunch lot in structured products, which don't perform well. The markets have dried out. There were two or three situations by the British government to lend them cash and give them security, but finally it was the first nationalization of a company in Britain since 1971. Northern Rock came into trouble and is now a nationalized British bank. The second thing is is a type of problem we have in Europe with banks who belong to the public and the private sector. You pointed out IKB. IKB was a project financer for small and medium-sized business people. Just a small bank. You've dozens here in this area. They invested about 15 billion euro in these structured products, especially in subprime loans, and they get in trouble. And as you pointed out, the public banking sector was starting to help them. The KfW, which is the largest public bank in Germany, and owns about 1/3 of the company IKB, was investing. And at the recent situation, probably there will be further steps to follow, and this is a problem. Probably we will put the IKB on the public sheet as well. There will no be nationalization or something like that, but nevertheless it will cost the German taxpayer a lot of money. Then we have situations in Europe like UBS, the very prominent Swiss private-run bank. I don't know how you feel it, but in Europe we feel the heart of stability is Swiss. They are the best bankers all over the world. They are the benchmarks, and UBS came into trouble and was saved, like Merrill Lynch and Citigroup and Morgan Stanley, by Asian Public Wealth Fund. And other Swiss banks got into problems. So actually, we're now in the period that we see that our banking system is infatuated by the fact that American banks gave loans to people who can't afford that. And then these things were structured nobody can understand. What's the reaction team on that? On the political side, the first is search for the usual suspects. Then the second step probably is call for regulation, and the third step is the lack of self-criticism in that. What are the usual suspects? Private equity. They have nothing to do with it, but there's a general sentiment that private equity companies have been a suspect to everything. They are investing in European companies because of, for several reasons. There was a call for regulation, but after a while we realized that they were not responsible. Then the hedge funds, better known in Europe as low costs, are on the agenda. We have, there's a big transparency discussion whether the investment schemes of this financial institution can be more open to the public. I know that there's a hedge fund is a term for very different business approach to the financial markets, from very risky to very math-based investment strategies. But at least what we can say, the European discussion says, they promise to put liquidity in the markets in such a situation, and they haven't, but they didn't cause anything. Then we have the sovereign wealth funds. I don't have to explain something about Dubai Port in the United States. We think that every European country now realized that after a while, these money we gave to the oil exporting countries coming now back in the form from sovereign wealth funds and investment, and we thought that technology and national interest is something. But actually what they did in this crisis was something good. They stabilized some banks in the US and in Europe, that they don't go bankrupt. There was maybe a cheap bit to them. Nevertheless, I would have done the same if I were public wealth fund. There's a discussion whether they can act less or more public or not. There is a good example are the Norwegians. They are publishing annual reports and all these stuff and make politicians feel good that this is something else. We have a very special problem, actually, especially with Russia, where we see a combination of political and economic approach. The G7 meeting of finance ministers has brought up the idea that we have some kind of best practice examples. The OECD and the IMF are working on it. And we'll see what's going on there. Then we come to the crash course in structured products. Let's call it structured products. Anything else, securitization products or collateral damage, and all these stuff is much too hard for me to pronounce and even harder to understand. What's the state of the art of the discussion? What has gone wrong here? The first is, I have 2 or 3 questions I want to raise. Was it a good idea to sever the link between those who scrutinize borrowers and those who are hit when they default? Actually, that's one of the, if you don't come from the finance business and come from the real economy, probably this structure seems to be a bit strange, and actually at least it leads to a bit lack of accountability on these products and the structure. The second question actually I want to raise is, do the investment banks and others who have done a great deal in this understood what they've done? Sometimes I'm talking to investment bankers and they try to explain something to me, and then they answer, "You're right, it's not very impressive what we've done." And then my conclusion is not everybody has understood when they were structuring products, actually. Otherwise, it would not have happened to them. And some are openly speaking about poorly structured. There's a kind of data problem including there. The people, the risks are not understood. They do not know how the loans are performing after the things are going to be structured. Actually, there's a point I just discussed at the IMF, whether we need more data on these development of the structured products. Nobody actually was interested in Europe on subprime loans before last year. But on the other hand, if these structured products and the diversity of risks lead to credit crunches and to the complete breakdown of parts of the financial markets, there must be probably a kind of supervising data supply, and probably the IMF or other multilateral institution could be a good deal. And then the third question is the role of the rating agencies, which is seen very severe among politics. The arguments discussed there is there collusion collusive action between those who rate and those who offer the products. I now learn that those who are working on the structuring of the debt are phoning those who rate them. And then the question was, what shall we do to structure it like a AAA thing? But I think this is the most complicated thing because there are a lot of solutions, and none of them actually does impress me that much. For example, if you make a European rating agency to make more competition to Moody's and Standard & Poor's, can be answered. There is a European rating agency with Fitch. If it doesn't work on a private basis, why should it work if you make it a thing? Is it actually never? The rating agencies have never said that their rating is an excuse for not doing a due diligence or something like that on a product. So actually, the expectations toward rating agency are too high. But on the other hand, only three in a market which is necessary for fiscal market stability, only 3 actors in it. That seems to be that there is a question of opening markets and competition as an answer. Probably, if that doesn't happen, the question to regulation will be much more forcing to do. Finally, I want to give you some ideas of what we're participating as Germany in international thing. All these things cannot be solved nationally. As I understand, Congress is doing, German Parliament is doing, a European Parliament is doing. We need an international approach to that because the risks don't stop at border. Securitized products are not. I think the G7 finance ministers are a good forum. They've done a first analysis of the issue in November. They have to deliver more precise options in April when they meet the second time this year. I want to point out that we have I think on the political field, we have a positive role of the central bank referred to the fact that they put liquidity in the market. I'm not quite sure whether on a transatlantic dialogue the interest rate policies of the Fed and the European Central Bank will will be commented like this, but because we have a different approach there, the kind of bailout the Fed is doing at the moment has been seen very critical in the European Union, and probably without saying that, but knowing that, into the central bank. I think I see on the political agenda as well whether we have financial institutions that can give us stabilizing information and framework for international cooperation, like the IMF. In Washington, there is an ongoing not only in Washington, there's an ongoing discussion on what's the future role of the IMF. Why the hell do we need an IMF? Is one of the questions. One answer is, well, we need a multilateral institution, for example, who let us a database as a kind of insurance against financial crises. I see there a thing therefore actually, and then I'm expecting that we have a less regulation, but more self-regulation on that field. But transparency is the overall. As long as all these actors in these new financial markets and the new financial system, with all these financial innovations, don't show to the legislator that they have a kind of transparent approach. If they don't show that, then the legislator will call for regulation. If there's a self-regulating process that gives us necessary information, and that what we lost over the last 12 months, a kind of confidence in the action, so then the alternative is clear. So finally, I want to say I'm not accusing the United States or the United Financial Institution for anything. I learned a lot about the financial innovations and political political answers over the last 12 months, and we probably will have to deal with the task we have to have within the next years. Thank you for your patience, and I'm glad we have an open discussion now.
Thank you, Herr Kampeter. fascinating discussion. What I'm going to do is just ask one quick question and then open it up to the floor. If you could just introduce yourself, again with your name and your affiliation. We'll take questions for the next half hour, 45 minutes. Okay. My question is really, what is your advice to the U.S. Congress right now? You've just kind of laid it out that if there's no, it sounds like if there's no self-regulation, if there's no kind of movement towards a heightened level of transparency within these kind of these areas of innovative structured finance, that you believe that the legislature should go in. What's when you're talking with members of Congress, what's your advice here in Washington? I think the outsized role of the American economy in this particular crisis means that there's got to be some type of response here in the United States. What's your advice, and what's the timeline that you're thinking that need this changes, if they don't happen spontaneously from within the financial markets themselves, should happen from Congress?
I'm not an advisor to the American Congress, but I can share my analysis to that. First is, crisis still in progress. Immediate action doesn't help if you come to regulatory affairs. It actually doesn't help. I don't know whether there is another necessary bailout in German banking system at the moment. I hope not. And sometimes I have the fear that the bankers even don't know. And I'm not quite sure what's the financial situation of your major financial players. Is that what we've heard about the big four who gain money from abroad? Is that the result? We have at the end of until the end of March, data will be published by the banks. And probably at the end of June, the other companies will give their profit figures, and then you will have a dimension. Any political action that says, okay, I got a big idea, let's make a regulation, or let's make this and that, must realize while the crisis is in progress to draw final conclusion. It's a bit too early. So my only analysis would be coordinate the international discussion on that. Discuss the schemes as like I told on G7 meeting where the major players in that field show up, but don't shoot too fast. Actually, that's the contribution of the financial markets to growth is at least in Europe is underestimated. We need efficient financial markets for in 21st century. We are not only the producing countries here, no longer. And they've gained a lot of wealth all over the world. They gained work to many people who are in this business. And now the task is to combine all these financial innovations on the one hand with a financial market stability. That's actually what we should do. And I don't see that there's a simple answer. What I understand from the colleagues of the Congress, that they are arguing whether they need a stimulus or another bailout program or something like that. That may be necessary, at least with the side to November this year. Whether it helps or not, I'm not able to judge. I'll ask Mr. Lazar or others. But I don't see that it's now the time to make a big regulatory effort on the financial markets and the different actors on there.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to open it up to the field. Who would like to add? Sure, Francois?
Yeah. I have two questions, if I may. One relates to the German banking system. You mentioned IKB, and the fact that it was a small size or medium-sized bank in comparison with other large banks in the UK. So that begs the question as to what's the rationale for a too big bailout?
Pardon?
The rationale for a too big bailout of a bank which is not systemic.
Can I?
Relates to what you said about the IMF and its possible role in terms of leverage. If you can be more specific about that.
Okay. Yes, very. I asked this question a few months ago because I don't understood that this small bank is systemic and we are engaged as a public lender over there. it is misbehavior of small saving banks and Genossenschaftsbanken. Was ist das? Let's call decentralized bank. Those who are hated by the IMF. Those banks, they have misbehaved. Cooperative banks and public saving banks. They invested in papers by the IKB because they thought they were rated BB. And that was actually a way of refinancing. The problem at the moment is we have the interest rate curve is very flat, and the usually small banks lend money on the long end and sell it on the short end. That's the business model. Yeah. And it's if the interest rate is curve is flat like it's for the last 3 or 4 years probably. You look attractive investment. They offered it, and IKB refinanced it on the thing. So they would have. This is not a systemic bank, but the virus of devaluating assets would have hit hundreds of small, medium saving banks and cooperative banks in Germany, and probably that would have caused a banking crisis because of their estimation that a BB rated paper is good. We call it Inhaberschuldverschreibung. Who can translate that? They bought papers. Let's call it papers. Papers which are not securitized, and they wouldn't have got any euro or dollar back out of it. That's the problem. I didn't know the problem before I went into the IKB case, but that is how a non-systemic bank can infatuate a decentralized banking system like we have in Germany.
And then the second question on the role of the IMF.
The role of the IMF? Okay, actually, I met with Lipsky this morning, so I raised the question: how's IMF reform? And he was presenting me the recent actual discussions. And I think they're on a good way. And my impression on that is that in addition to that, what the IMF is preparing at the moment on the area where Häusler was, and the I don't know, the Spanish guy is Caruana is now. You should expand that. That was my recommendation. I think the IMF. I told you that nobody knows how these loans were performing, and it's a question of structural financial market data. And if these structured products and their performance are that vital for example, interbanking markets, financial market stability, we probably need data to evaluate whether there's the source of the financial crisis. There were only a few in spring last year I met who said that there is a crisis. Yep. And Jim Cramer was one, as I know. But probably he failed more than he was right over the last 10 years. But nevertheless, there were by chance nobody was seeing it. The IMF actually has the capability of seeing it. They were describing that there were risks. They could have been more outspoken. I'm not criticizing the IMF, but nevertheless, they should kind of can be in kind of insurance. They're not insurance, but information policy or something like that. They can deliver the data that then the acting people in the financial market can draw results of it.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'd like to comment on the Fed has made the comment here in America that America is a housing-based economy, along with the Kingdom and Australia, which are also Anglo-Saxon countries. Germany is not. Now Spain has a housing bubble like the UK and the US, by accident because Spain has become an Anglo-style housing finance place. But lessons to be learned from the perspective from the World Bank, and I'm speaking here for myself. The IFC, where I work, private sector arm of the World Bank, is essentially exporting the last 10 years the US suburban lifestyle model, cities to Mexico and other countries, and is exporting the American-style housing finance model, which is based on, I described this in some terms here, overconsumption in housing, house ownership that is actually too high, and people enticed to borrow against their housing. And I want to pass to you, in California, 15 to 20% of disposable income has come from house equity loans. And in in other countries can maybe shape developing countries to have housing policies that are maybe more sustainable and based on capital formation and productive product. I'm not sharing this with you because this is a seminar what we see here.
You being German, actually, very close to my position. To my impression over the last years, and you see a very critical analysis all over the world, the Fed has bailed out the problems of your housing financing system. I know that this is a very political comment on American politics, but it's my private view on that. And you will find all over the world, including the IMF, probably some economists who will support my political view on that. So, second, I can explain how we're doing it. Actually, we ask those who buy a house for securities. Well, we're not financing them 100%. We have long-term contracts. Actually, and the role of the bank is to analyze: is this person able to pay for his house? The bad thing we don't have the exploding housing prices actually, and we have a lower situation, but lower Eigentumsrate ownership rate in housing. But our housing market is more stable but less profitable. That's actually when I'm talking to American investment banks, they're always accusing us that we have too few house owners actually. But as I see the system, the ownership of a house is something what a German, in a way that you buy it and 6 or 7 months resell it, is something what we would feel it's a kind of rent. When a German buys a house, at least if he buys it for his whole life. It's a different type of building it. So the completely structure, the financial structure is built on this basis idea that if you buy a house, you keep it at least for the half of your life, and that's the basis of the finance, and the risk analysis of the bank is very crucial to the fact whether you can buy a house or not. So that's the main difference. And we thought in Germany we were well off with that system. But then the flat interest rate curve drove our bankers into let's call it structured products, where they usually have no clue before 5 or 10 years. Actually, that's the problem with that. But I agree. Those Anglo-Saxon societies who now feel that thinking that every house has a growing value over until 2200 should look whether this is a good idea, including those securitized risks. And there will not ever be the possibility of bailout to the Fed. The bubble, actually, by going down the interest rates from economic perspective, is nothing else than to prolong the bubble in the housing market here. There's nothing else. The question will be: will it blow, or can you let the air out slowly? That's the only question. But it is a housing bubble, and the interest rate policy of the Fed is nothing else but bailout. The difference is that our bailout comes from the federal budget, and here it comes from the Fed. Sounds similar. It's a bit different, but the same effect.
Just want to underscore that as well. Exporting the suburban American suburban economic model is increasingly unsustainable as a proposition. When you're looking at China and looking at how you're going to incorporate 1.1 billion more Chinese into the formal sector, you can't do it on that model. And to what extent? India is the same case. So we're going to have to really look as an international community at how we do that to make sure that we have an international economic order that is stable, sustainable, inclusive, and hopefully democratic. Okay. Further questions? Sir.
My name is Michael. We have in English and there's also German concept of washing the hands of something. And when you originate a loan, it's almost with some balance. And you get the fee for origination, and you're not going to be managing that loan or whatever repayment. What perhaps you get, importantly, you get fees for that, and you get a salary. The salary is something you get pushed like private. First, we got syndicates going, or we securitize it, get fees, and when that's sold, they go off their hands with it. But in the meantime, they get a salary. And if a sovereign wealth fund used to go to the bank, that's a nice block of money, some of which is always used to sell. Good fee, that's private. But it's the institution of the bank, or it's the institution of the company, or the corporation, which has done the work. You can't get at the people who have their salaries by getting at the institution, which is illegal and fit to this. How one changes that percentage system, I don't know, but it really leads to what you do. And the officials know that. Simply to work and
I can understand your view on it, but I'm not praising these structured products, but they make the market more efficient from the analysis. They have defects and faults. I don't. That's quite right. But for the diversification of risk, that's what is the idea for structuring, is from a perspective of economic, from an economic perspective, not the worst thing you can do. The thing is how responsible every actor is, and how does the risk they are exposed. No,
How's it shared?
Is risk sharing? If you have all the benefits and no risks, you structure poorly probably, and that you have to look very precisely on the structuring process, on the responsibilities, on the risk and burden sharing process. But in general, it's a good idea, and be careful if you just say no, you shouldn't do that. If I look at your market and talk about student loans and credit cards, I see a bunch of structured products as well. They are performing differently good, but they are performing good. So the structured product market is not only focused on the subprime thing. If the credit card structure breaks down here in this consume-based economy, the side effects will not be accepted by everything to be very, very defending. So I would say yes to securitization and structuring products, but I would say let's look at it just at the process. I've described 2 or 3 questions I raised in securitization and structuring products, but please, they make the financial market efficient. Burden sharing and risk sharing is efficient as long as everybody feels burden and risk.
Thank you. Another question?
How do you then get the backwards flow first? We see the forward flow first. I can make risk flow forward by selling off. How do I experience as the person who sold it some backwards flow? So I have some discipline that's focused on me. I mean, Warren Buffett the other day was pleased that banks are going through some difficulties. But publicly pleased, he said sometimes. And you know, but it's place to have that shot for you.
I don't see the problem in this structured products, but I see that giving a loan to a person whom, when you're giving the loan, to the bank, is quite clear that he can't pay for it. That's the problem at the basis. Actually, we have laws in Germany that would not allow the segment of the subprime markets. You can't get a loan for a house in the way you can here. You have to give them securities. You can't get a 100% loan. It's about 60 to 80%. You have to bring money with. As a result, we have fewer house owners. Okay, but we have not such a subprime activities there. These people usually would rent a flat or a house, and the risk of the owner of the house is that he gets his Miete, was heißt das denn? His rent, gets his rent, but we don't have a financial crisis out of it. And I'm not quite sure whether we can securitize those. Probably we can, but if you have a good thing, but they can structure everything. But nevertheless, it makes things stable. So please do not accuse the structured market for a mistake. I would suggest the politics have made that the legal construction is here that person with low income get big loans for the house and the SUV to buy. So that's a problem actually that has nothing to do with structured finance, but with the way that the credit laws in this country let people get credit, which usually from the German point or the European point of view won't ever get a loan of that dimension. They will get a loan, but they will be asked, bring some money with me. They will be looked on the payment, how secure is it, and they will be they have to explain what does that mean when the interest rate fixation runs off, and all these things. We have a very consumer friendly law on that, but the American system is different, and I see there the source of evil. If I look on the subprime market, actually.
Yes, please.
Susan Weston, you made a very valid point that this situation, whether you call it a crisis or not, has not played out yet. And in the U.S., you can read many different predictions of what it's really going to mean to the real economy. From all the way from a mild recession into a period of no or negative growth for lasting for 2 or 3 years. For the worst situation, how do you think, what's your feeling of how that would impact Europe?
Actually, it is not the role of a politician describing a catastrophe. I'm talking about risks and political reaction. I think we can manage this situation. I described something about the political framework on G7 on the international level. I'm not keen on, and I shouldn't talk about. I know that there's a legislation going on here on the Hill, but I'm a German politician and I'm not advising American politics to act in this or that way. I'm just trying to get in contact there. So. But the risk I would describe is if we don't get along with it in this field, and we get to another issues I described with student loans or the credit card markets, we get some ratings problem to other field of financial market innovation. You will have certainly a tremendous effect on the real economy. As I read the economic report to the president, they describe it like describe Europe's situation, robust but not performing as good as 2007. And now we have to do our job as politicians: see the risk, analyze, action taking. Don't make the people crazy. If for example. Your treasury would call, would make it every day a public announcement how risky everything is. The markets will dry out, as the economists say. To normal person's perspective, we will have more losses. We will have fewer taxes and more investment in bailouts. So the task of the politics is to calm down people, to regain trust in the financial market institution, and that will reduce losses and will make things more stable. And now I'm not proposing to describe the maximum default on these things, but I'm very open speaking about risks and necessary action. So this is a very diplomatic. Probably nobody, even Ben Bernanke or his predecessors, could be more precise with the knowledge of the markets they have.
But that wasn't precisely my question.
Then I misunderstood, and I apologize.
I'm not asking you to comment on what you think the scenario in the U.S. will be. I'm asking you, if it really turns bad, how will that affect Europe?
Same as in the U.S., growth down, inflation up, dried out markets. Probably there will be bankrupt as well as there probably will be here. Certain distrust in financial markets institution, and very precisely a recession. So it is, as I pointed out, this is not an American, a German, or a European problem. And probably will be in the second half in 2008 a Japanese problem or Asian problem, including because I don't know, but I can hardly believe that they have no investment in this. So I can hardly believe, and I'm not knowing anything. So if we can collaborate, the recession probably will be the result, and not a recession in the financial markets, and that some managers lose their job there, and the bonuses are going down. It will be real economy recession.
I'm going to step in for a second. Question back onto this topic of sovereign wealth funds. We've seen Singapore bailout, UBS. We've seen UAE bailout. Our friends over at Citi. This is becoming an increasingly common phenomenon. And you're talking about making sure that the different players in the securitization process all feel the risk and all share that risk burden. To what extent do you see sovereign wealth funds coming in and relieving a lot of these businesses, these firms, from that risk in terms of that bailout? Clearly it's stabilizing the market, but it's also having that kind of, it's taking that risk, taking the consequences away from players in this market. How do you see sovereign wealth funds, the role of it, and what should we look for going forward?
I don't know why they're doing it, actually, because beside the Norwegians, they don't say anything about it, why they're doing and what they're doing. The business model, the countries who are all exporting have money. For a long time, they bought our debt. Then the interest rates gone down, and they said buying debt from the US, Germany, and Europe and all these places is a very unsexy thing. And then they started to make what actually is quite normal. Citi and others are offering it. They make wealth management. They're seeking investments. I would do if I have that bunch of money. Probably similar, seeking investments, and while we bought their oil for dozens of years, now they are buying our companies with the money we gave them. So that's a very wealth transformation process, which is very natural. So they're doing nothing. They are not doing anything irrational or not understandable. They're doing quite what they should do. What shall they do with their money? Give it to the Pope, to the charities all over the world? No, they're investing it. That's a classical American approach to do. Well, if you have money, what you're doing, let it work. So they're doing anything wrong. Second, of course, I think they finance a bailout, but I don't know what Citi gave them to them, or Merrill Lynch, or those. They probably get some share, and they think this is cheap investment, probably. They would have paid a higher price in normal situation. There are several expressions for that. So they're buying a part of the American investment bank. So, okay, there's nothing to be said against it. And ask some members, not of Citi, of these investment bank, how do you feel about this? If they finance our bailout, everything's fine. They don't see any political risk and influence on that. Third, what we have actually on that field is a discussion of the combination of political attempt and economic force in public wealth fund. That is actually the basis. And as I understand, President Bush was willing to allow the investment of Dubai Port, and the Congress was saying no with this CFIUS process. And we looked at it. The French always are regulators. They love it, and they're doing something similar. The British are arguing about it, and the Germans, because we see two fields of strategic interest. That is, has to do something with energy and with technology. We don't. For example, we get 2/3 of our liquid gas from Russia. If they're buying our power plant companies, we will be completely reliable on Russian political decision. And you can argue, okay, your oil comes from non-democratic countries as well, where you don't know what's going to happen, and the distribution ways aren't that stable. But that is not a good argument dependent on another non-democratic, non-transparent player. And so we're looking we look at your CFIUS process, we look at the other countries, whether we can make a veto on that kind of strategic investments, but Probably if there are other foreign investments with or without public wealth funds, for example, Volkswagen belongs to some Arabic public wealth fund to a certain extent, and all. We have several such kind of investments there. We are not arguing against it. There's people fear foreign investment. There's a demand for regulation and a demand for closing up markets because of shrinking legitimacy of the results of the market process. And public wealth fund discussion is only one sign for it.
Okay. Sure. Please go ahead.
You've been very diplomatic, but I'd like to push you a little bit.
It's very unusual for me. If you ask in Germany, nobody will believe that.
So that I understand sort of the German concerns about our subprime. I can perceive several different reactions, and what I hope you could do is tell me which ones are there, which ones are not, or how it's changing. One reaction would be, we're not going to buy any more of these structured products, security products from the U.S. until the U.S. has more transparency, some kind of a new regulatory system that assures us what the components of these products are. A second possible answer would be just blaming your own analysts. They didn't do a good enough job before your banks purchased these products in understanding what they were consisting of, how risky, shaky some of these really were. A third one might be a multilateral global G7 approach. This is spreading around. We got to work all together. Could you get into these a little more? And I mean, how strong is the German economy, government, trying to persuade the U.S. that more transparency is needed, or self-blame, or what?
First of all, securitization or structuring products is not exclusively originated in the United States. It is a global business. The problem is that everybody has heard something about subprime now and thinks subprime is the problem. We discussed that earlier, controversially. You have to differentiate. There are several loans can be structured. Anything can be structured. Future pensions can be structured and brought to the market. Anything you can imagine. So please do not misunderstand me. It is not an American problem. It's not exclusive to American investment bankers. There are European and Asian investment bankers who can structure products as well. The basis, this example was a very invalid and not valuable and very intransparent thing, and the loans would have not been given from a normal human perspective in other countries in the EU. So that's my pre-answer. Is there a reaction? Do not buy anymore the American products. Actually, nobody buys at the moment these things. That's the problem. The economist used the term, the markets are dried out. What does that mean? Nobody knows the value of these structured products, nobody knows the concrete risk, and nobody pays anything. That is from the buyer's side, okay, but from the seller's side, it's a problem. That's actually the cause of the problem why all these holders of these papers are devaluating the worth of the worth of the papers, value of the paper, are devaluating the papers, and to accounting standards, they have to inform the markets and their owners that something is happening. That's the process which is taking place, and what we need is just the opposite: people buying these papers. If you devaluate them for 100%, the crisis will be even larger than it's today. For example, IKB, I think we do about up to 60-70%. So if we throw away the 60-70% as well, oops, then we will get a real problem. So the attempt is to make the markets liquid, as the economists say. That's actually what we're trying to do, regain confidence and all this stuff. It's not a thing. I'll talk about the analysts, the rating agency. Competition probably is a good thing to improve their judgment. Second, I would say we have to teach these young investment bankers the relativeness of ratings. Everybody thinks that, for example, a AAA of a Fed paper is same like the AAA of a structured product, which obviously is not right. The rating always is relative. When I'm talking in Germany about it, if you're a market of gangsters, a AAA is not the same worth if you buy a German a Bund paper. This is actually completely different. These ratings are relative. Sometimes I feel that these investment bankers who I'm getting in the Asia, that can be my sons or daughter, do not understand what they're doing with relatively, and they're communicating the wrong things. Actually, there's the marking, whether we can, I don't think that's a state regulatory affair, but these AAA does not mean that AAA is AAA in every market. This is if you make a rating among emerging markets, this is another rating, state rating in emerging markets, and that's the market which is relevant. A AAA means anything, and you make a global market, an African market rating, and so that means you have to understand what you're doing. I talked about. I was accusing the investment bankers that they hardly do not understand what they're doing, and it's only it has a buying and a selling side. Those who buy these things seem to be hardly to understand what a AAA meeting. Normally, in a conventional way, if you buy a company, you would start a due diligence to look what is it doing, what is the things worth, are there hidden secrets which will tease you, and all these due diligence processes, if you buy a company, cannot be substituted by three letters, AAA. That has to be made clear. But I'm not blaming the rating agencies. So just to put away from politics things. Politically spoken, actually, we need institutions to stabilize the market. We need markets need information. We need institutions that contribute these markets. They're obviously very imperfect. We need consultancy, communication structures between the states and the central banks on these new financial market innovations. Probably the next G8 or G7 meetings will deal with the problem, and we will have a framework that makes it this business running. It is a valuable business. I'm not arguing that it is a part of the evil thing of the world, but it has to be much more and precisely watched than it has been before. That maybe precisely. I'm trying. That was a summary of my statement at the beginning. So I should have made it faster then.
I would like to add to this specific point here what the situation is and why it might continue, despite your comments. I would say the German law is that you can only securitize what has a 60% loan to value maximum. And that, for example, is the law. It's the law and you can enforce. Now, what is also overlooked here is, I think, sometimes by politicians or newspapers like the Washington Post, who when interested advertising to sell and tell people that the market is turning around, is the extent of fraud, of mortgage fraud, which of course known to investment banks. That is happening on my street, when I check the mortgage records, which you can do. You can watch the mortgage records of your neighbors in America, and I've watched them for my entire street to see how bad it is. That is pretty bad in a good neighborhood in Bethesda. This is also, you see that people do not do their stuff. You see that people have this liar loans. 50% of people lie off their loans. You see 80 on the subprime. You see 85% of loans are not subprime, and they are defaulting at 5%, and this is growing. Because it can even be a prime borrower, and you can lie about the income, and that people do. So, and this is happening, and since the lobbyists of the brokers and the mortgage bankers and the mortgage brokers both succeed in not having documentation requirements, succeed in having loan-to-value ratio essentially intact, even if they come down a little bit, you will have a continuation of fraud, a continuation of securitization of non-properly securitized loans, and you will see that this whole bubble is still unwinding. 1 out of 10 Americans is underwater in this house, and if this bubble comes to an end, 1/3 of Americans who own a house will be underwater by 2010. And I think no one in Germany is fully understanding what this happens, and neither Obama nor Clinton nor McCain has any clue what that happens in this country. And I think we are in a seminal point here to see how the wealth of people is unraveling under our eyes. And for BMW it doesn't matter because the Asians buy the BMWs, but it does matter for everybody else who relies on the American market. 1/3 of American homeowners will be underwater by 2010. And even then, the bubble has not returned to what it means in house prices. And I think that should be, it doesn't get any, just to convey how that is looking.
Okay, did you want to ask a question? Okay, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave Torres in Europe. The problem with that analysis is that you then have a huge housing bubble because you won't have the income to support those loans. And we're talking about a real worldwide crisis. If you're right, I think they're grossly exaggerating the situation because you've got the niche who are good as livestock. Most sophisticated people who know what they can do with. Because people are richer, people are poor. The jumbos, in an area where you don't have a lot of jumbos, probably. Jumbos are extreme shooting in the United States. So you're exaggerating.
I tell you, in my, just if I may, in my suite there are 15 segmentations, check each mortgage, 1.5, 1.6, 1.2 million dollars, and they are all 95% financed with 18, 15, 18, 10 mortgages. Always the same 2-3 banks, and they have terrible rates. This is subprime or non-documented loans. This is, and they are all
Okay,
underwater.
okay, we're,
This is the
maybe we can continue that afterwards. We just have one more question for Mr. Kampeter. If we've got a question. I think I saw a hand in back. Go ahead.
The municipal bond insurers that we have back, especially detailed out. You talk about the need for transparency and for people to understand better what they buy. The fact of the matter is that the ordinary bond investor is buying, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000 worth of some bond. It's probably not even going to read this. Those things are fairly thick. You'll read, you get some sense of what the cost is, what your part of it is. You'll look at the rating, and basically you win. And there may be a hidden call on that somewhere, and if you get the prospectus of the technical landlord that paragraph, you don't see that. It's one thing to provide the information in pages and pages of print. It's another thing for the person to go up and understand. And the provision is not.
Oh.
So your call is so transparent.
We might disagree on the issue, but first of all, do we agree that there was a lack of information for the risks on these products? And I said that should not happen in future. We need more transparency in the structured product markets. The thing is, your point is, if there's efficient information, that does not mean that those who buy the products do really understand. That was your argument, wasn't it? Yes, but actually, these are free people, and what they actually, if they're buying these papers, knowing what there's in, they have the risk evaluation. And sometimes it might be useful buying very risky paper with high rates. Why not? If the information supplies you, it's a risky paper, and you have a conservative strategy, don't buy it. Go into fat papers with lower rates, perhaps. So the interest to invest in these papers are what you gain from for the investment. Actually, that's part of the game. And if you think your argument through, the only result will be forbid these papers or forbid securitization, because the risks are too high. Actually, I would not agree on that, but I know that there's a discussion that goes in that direction, but there we have probably different estimation. But finally, I would close with, let's agree to disagree on that.
And on that note, please help me thank Steffen Kampeter and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and the German Marshall Fund as well for bringing him over. We're in your debt, and thank you again, Steffen, and it's been a pleasure. I've learned incredible amount, and thank you for coming to the New America Foundation today.